There was a time when turning 16 meant something. It meant a paper route graduated into a real job. It meant a polyester uniform, a name tag, and a first paycheck you could actually hold in your hand. For generations of American teenagers, working wasn't optional, and it wasn't even really a choice. It was simply what you did. So what happened? Because today, for the first time in modern history, the teenage workforce has all but vanished. And the reasons why say more about how America itself has changed than most people realize. Rewind to the 1970s and 80s, and the picture looks almost unrecognizable compared to now. Nearly 6 out of every 10 American teenagers held a job at some point during the year. Grocery stores were staffed by high schoolers bagging orders after class. Fast food counters ran on a rotating cast of juniors and seniors squeezing in shifts between homework and football practice. Gas stations, movie theaters, ice cream parlors, department stores, all of them leaned on teenage labor as a matter of course. It wasn't seen as unusual or exploitative. It was seen as a rite of passage, right alongside getting a driver's license or going to prom, and the reasons teens worked back then were as much cultural as they were financial. Sure, plenty of kids needed the money for gas, for car insurance, for that stereo system they'd been eyeing. But there was also a broader expectation woven into the fabric of American life, an unspoken agreement that responsibility and independence were things you earned early, and a job was the proving ground. Parents pushed their kids toward that first job the way they pushed them toward good grades. It built character, they said. It taught the value of $1. And in a lot of ways, it did exactly that. Fast forward to today, and the numbers tell a completely different story. Teen labor force participation has dropped by roughly half since those peak decades. Walk into most retail stores or restaurants now, and you'll notice something. The workforce skews older. College students, adults picking up second jobs, retirees supplementing their income. The 16-year-old behind the counter has become the exception rather than the rule. So where did all those teenage workers go? Part of the answer is something that would have sounded almost unbelievable to a kid in 1985, and that's academic pressure. The competition to get into college has intensified to a degree that previous generations simply never experienced. Where a decent report card and a few extracurriculars used to be enough, today's students are expected to stack up advanced placement classes, specialized tutoring, travel sports, volunteer hours, and a resume of achievements before they've even graduated high school. There simply isn't room left in the schedule for a part-time job when every free hour is already accounted for by something that looks better on a college application. And that leads into the second major shift, which is how the entire concept of what makes a teenager productive has changed. In the old model, working a job was the productive thing to do. Now, that same energy gets funneled into structured activities that parents and schools view as more valuable long-term investments. Club soccer instead of a shift at the mall. SAT prep instead of scooping ice cream. It's not that today's teens are lazier, far from it. Many of them are working harder than ever. They're just working toward different goals, ones that don't come with a paycheck attached. Then there's the economic layer underneath all of this, and it's a complicated one. On one hand, many families today are simply more financially comfortable than families were in past decades, at least among the demographics driving national statistics, which means the urgent need for a teenager to contribute income has lessened for a portion of the population. On the other hand, and this is the twist, minimum wage jobs have become more competitive, not less. Adults who lost stable full-time work, immigrants entering the labor market, and people needing flexible part-time income have all been competing for the same entry-level positions that used to belong almost exclusively to teenagers. A 16-year-old with no experience is often going up against a 35-year-old with years of work history for the exact same cashier position. And employers, understandably, tend to lean toward the more reliable option. Technology deserves its own mention here too, because it has quietly reshaped what work even looks like to a young person. Self-checkout lanes replaced cashiers. Online ordering replaced the kid taking your order at the counter. Automation ate into exactly the kind of entry-level, low-skill positions that used to be the default first job for a teenager. At the same time, technology opened up entirely new avenues of earning that didn't exist a generation ago. A teenager today might make money reselling sneakers online, tutoring younger students over video chat, building a small following on social media, or picking up freelance graphic design gigs from their bedroom. It's still work, and it still teaches some of the same lessons about money and effort, but it doesn't show up in the same labor statistics as a shift at the local diner, and it doesn't build the same kind of face-to-face experience that a traditional job once did. There's also a quieter cultural shift happening underneath all of this, and it has to do with how differently this generation of parents approaches childhood itself compared to the generations before them. Many parents today are hesitant to push their kids into the workforce early, worried it'll add stress to already overloaded schedules, or that it'll cut into time better spent on academics, mental health, or simply being a kid a little longer. Childhood, in a sense, has been extended. Where a teenager in 1975 was expected to start shouldering adult responsibilities early, today's teenager is often actively protected from exactly that kind of pressure, for better or worse, depending on who you ask. And that raises the real question hiding underneath all these numbers and trends. What gets lost when an entire generation skips that early rite of passage? Because a first job used to teach things that no classroom or extracurricular really replicates. It taught how to deal with a difficult customer, how to show up on time even when you didn't feel like it, how to take direction from a boss who wasn't your parent, how to budget a paycheck you earned yourself instead of an allowance that was simply given to you. These are small lessons individually, but stacked together over a summer or a school year, they used to shape a kind of independence and resilience that's harder to replicate any other way. Some economists and educators argue this shift isn't actually a loss at all, just a redirection. Today's teens are gaining different kinds of experience, digital literacy, entrepreneurial thinking, academic rigor, that will serve them well in a completely different economy than the one their parents entered. Others worry that something genuinely valuable is slipping away, that there's no substitute for the specific kind of humility and grit that comes from being 16 years old and getting yelled at by a difficult customer over a wrong order, then having to go back out and smile at the next one anyway. Maybe the truth sits somewhere in between. The teenage workforce of the past wasn't perfect, and plenty of those old jobs were genuinely thankless, low-paying, and forgettable. But there was something quietly formative about that first taste of responsibility, about handing over a portion of your summer in exchange for a paycheck and a lesson in what the real world actually expects from you. Whether today's teens are missing out on that, or simply finding it in new and different forms, is still very much an open question. But one thing is clear. The picture of American adolescence has changed dramatically in just a few decades, and the empty cash registers where teenage workers used to stand are proof of just how much.